Hello and welcome to the Young Voices project for the Township Sun. This is the second of 3 workshops on how to write fiction for magazines. So I'm just going to share the screen. So yes, writing fiction for magazines. So if you remember in the first workshop, what we looked at was how to write an amazing opening for your short story, one that really hooks the reader in and makes them want to read more. Today we're going to be looking at 2 different options on how to structure the short story, and also the importance of having a strong middle and what sort of things to include in that middle to really make the story flow. There is just a quick warm-up exercise if you are interested in it. Have a go. Just write a to-do list for your main character, the protagonist, and another one for the antagonist. So it could be like a big picture, a list of hopes and dreams, or it could be a very specific one. What do they need to do today? But it's just something to get the writing juices flowing and get you warmed up. So what do we mean by structure? When we talk about structure in short stories, it refers to the length and arrangement of scenes, so the order of events that happen in your story. It also refers to the movement through time, so use of flashbacks and flash forwards, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit in a few minutes. Plus how you distribute, how you sprinkle in the exposition. So the exposition, if you remember, it is the details that gives the reader the background information that they need in order to really understand the story. So structure and pace are very important in short stories. You don't want to rush the story so that the reader doesn't feel its full impact. So they don't really get what's going on. They're just rushed along by events. But you also don't want them to fall asleep. You don't want them to be bored and to go, oh, I just can't handle this anymore, and stop reading. So it's important that we get the structure and the pace correct in short stories. So there are different options for structure. So if you think about, I like to call it like the scaffolding. If you think of a scaffolding on a building, so the structure is the scaffolding. Then the inside, the actual house building, you've got things like plot and character and setting and dialogue, things like that go in to make up the house. But the structure around it, the scaffolding around it, that's the structure. And there are lots of different options for a structure for a short story. And you need to find one that works for you, but also one that works for your story. So you might find that one structure works really well for one story, but the next time you come to write, it really doesn't work. So you want to use a different structure, which will work better. We're going to look briefly at 2 different structures that are very popular for short stories. The first one is the 3-act structure. So this is similar to the 5-act structure that the writers tend to use for writing longer pieces of work. It's very common in novels. 3-act structure is a very simple way of arranging the events in your story. So 3 acts. Act 1, introduction. This is where you introduce your characters, you introduce the setting. Then some crisis, something happens. This is the inciting incident that takes your protagonist out of their comfort zone. Act 2, the confrontation. The protagonist has a setback in achieving their goals. As a writer, you want to make it worse for your characters because it raises the tension. It makes the reader want to read on. Oh my goodness, what's going to happen? Can they achieve their goal? Can they not? What's going to happen? It makes the reader want to read on. So you really want to make it worse for your characters. Act 3 is the resolution. So this is where the protagonist, they take some sort of action to overcome the obstacle. And then it's up to you. Do they actually achieve their goal in the end, or do they not? You can see where it goes. The other option that we're going to look at today is the ABDCE structure. So with this, you start with A for action. That's where you start. You make it compelling enough that the reader wants to know more. B is for background. This is where we show the readers, the characters, how they came to be there, what are their relationships to each other, how their past has affected who they are now, things like that. D is for development, where we develop the characters. What are their hopes and their goals? What are their motivations? What sort of things are stopping them? So this is where you can really explore the internal and external conflicts. It's where you raise the tension, you raise the stakes, and then you come to see climax. So this is everything comes together for the big finale, the big climax, after which the characters are going to be in some way different at the end of the story to how they were at the start of the story. Okay, so they've had that character arc, that journey. And E is for ending. So how did it change them? Who are they now? What does it all mean? In short stories, you don't have a lot of word count for the ending, but it is nice sometimes to include some sort of a hint to the future. If you have time or the inclination, or you can either talk about this with someone that you know, or just have a think about it. Think about your favorite books or stories. Think about the last book that you read. Can you recognize in those a structure? Can you see how the author has arranged the events of the story? In what order? Did they use flash forwards, flashbacks? Did they use a 3-act structure? How much of a structure is there? Did it work? Did it not work? What do you think? Have a think about it. Common problems with structure. So sometimes writers do get into a bit of a pickle with their structure for a number of different reasons. We're going to look at 3. So flashbacks, present action. When we're talking about a story, the present action, it refers to the time frame in which the main action of the story happens. Okay, so it is often, but not always, introduced at the beginning, but it is the time frame in which the reader is most committed to. It's the one that they care about the most, is the present action. Any movement away from this, using flash forwards or flashbacks, it should be used to strengthen the present action. If you're going to use flashbacks or flash forwards, you basically want to use it in order to give more information, to add a layer, to add depth to your characters. Does it give the reader an insight into the motivations or the mindset of the main character? So does it increase their understanding? Do they go, oh, I understand why they're doing that? If it works, if your story works, the present action, if it works just as well without the flashback or the flash forward, leave it out. Especially with short stories, you really do not have the word limit. You don't have the words to include digressions unless they're really vital to the story. Thinking stories, try to avoid thinking stories. So these are ones that have the main character basically not really doing very much. There's not a lot of action going on, but they are thinking lots. So either sitting and thinking, eating and thinking, running and thinking, that sort of thing. These types of present action scenes, it can just turn into an excuse for the writer, or it's a device for the writer to share the character's thoughts and give exposition and background. But you can't really escape the fact that they're just, like, for 3 or 4 pages, they're just sitting and thinking, or they're not really doing very much in thinking. Readers are very sophisticated these days. They are going to see through this as just a way of them getting, a way of the author getting the information to the reader. You need to be a bit more subtle. You need to sprinkle it on in different ways, rather than, a lot of people call that an info dump, if you're giving just a big info dump. So make sure that the external action, what the character is actually doing, is just as interesting and relevant as what's going on inside the character's head. So their thoughts and their feelings. The present action, what they're actually doing while they're having these thoughts and feelings, needs to be just as interesting. Frame bookend stories. So lots of people call these frame, like a window frame. I call them bookend stories. I like that image. Works better for me. So here, the present action is used to bookend the main story. So the story opens in the present action. 2 policewomen, are eating at a cafe. One says to the other, so let me tell you about this murder I worked on a few years back. It's all about a woman called Nancy. And then, so you open in the present action, you then get the flashback. So the main part of the story is the flashback, which is the murder tale. It's all about Nancy and the murder. That's the majority of the short story. Then at the end, so the other bookend, we return to the cafe and the policewomen to end the piece. It is often very hard to do. You don't have a lot of word count in a short story to make the bookends flow or connect with the reader. It's very difficult to do. So you need to think about that. Think about if the story, would it make sense if you just didn't include the bookends? Because if it does make sense without bookends, just don't include them. You don't need it. Just keep the inner portion. The dramatic action of the bookends need to be just as vital and important as the inner bit, as the flashback. Okay. As I said, you don't have the word space to do a lot on the bookends. But if you do use this, it should add another layer to the story. So it should add more depth to the characters, should give the reader more understanding why they're doing the things that they're doing, why their goal is so important to them, that sort of thing. So first exercise, if you were like to do the exercise, fantastic. Just pause the video for 10-15 minutes. I would like you to try out the 3-act structure for your story. So I don't need you to write it all out, but just write a summary or write a list of key events for the 3-act structure. So you have the introduction, the confrontation, and the resolution. I've given you a bit of an example there just to get you started. The middle of a short story. Now, the middle of a short story, it is the place where it can get bogged down. You can get into problems in the middle of the short story. You've got an amazing opening, you've got an amazing end, but the middle is very difficult. It loses its focus, it waffles a bit, gets a bit bogged down. So there are things that you can include in the middle to prevent this. Okay, so things that you need to think about. It should have that conflict in the internal and or the external conflict. The main character should have an obstacle, so a setback in achieving their goal. So there must be some reason why they can't simply just go and get their goal, go and achieve the thing that they want to achieve. It builds towards a moment of change. So that change, that internal, external conflict, that character arc, that journey that they're going on, there's a moment of change when they realize that they can do something that they previously didn't think that they could do. You don't have the space to introduce lots of minor characters. You don't have the space to change location lots and lots of times or really add a subplot. With a short story, you really need to be aware of that word count and things to not include in order to make it a much watered down story, if that makes sense. So stay focused on the character's goal, keep up the pace, don't slow it down too much. Think about each sentence. It should reveal character or advance the action. So when we talk about developing the characters, this is really important because you want to help the reader connect with the main character. So what are their motivations? How do they deal with a setback or an obstacle? That tells the reader a lot about this character. How do they deal with conflict? And again, it tells the reader a lot about this person, this character. Do they run to the bedroom and hide under the bed? Do they laugh it off? Do they, take a deep breath and go, oh, this is really scary, but I am going to do this. I am. So make sure your characters are fully formed and not two-dimensional or cliched. Show their feelings. How are they being affected by the events? So again, this can reveal a lot about a character without telling the reader, but showing the reader about this character and adding layers to their characterization. You can show their feelings. How are they affected? Are they worried? Are they scared? Are they angry? Are they happy? Are they feeling really anxious? Those sort of things. So show the reader this. Make it personal. So raise the stakes for the character and make sure it's personal to them. If you make it really personal to them, it will keep the reader engaged and the reader will be rooting for this character. As I said, give the reader at least one character that they can root for. That can really help a story. Every character should want something, even if it is directions or a glass of water. Every character in your short story should have a want, should be clear what it is, why they're there, what it is they want. Use dialogue to make the character come to life and show the reader their reactions, their thoughts and their feelings. Dialogue is so important in lots of different types of stories. In short stories, dialogue can really make a piece absolutely come alive and jump off the page at you. So think about using dialogue. Don't be scared of it. Think about how the middle was going to lead flow into the end of the story. So it is not a piece of writing on its own. It is connected to the beginning of the story and the end of the story. Stay focused on that. It does flow into the end. So be aware of how it ends and how the middle is leading up to that ending. Make sure it doesn't digress, it doesn't go off onto tangents, because again, short stories, you don't have the word space, you don't have the word count in order to do that. So make sure it is focused on the end. So homework, write the middle 500 words of your short story. So think about the structure. How are you going to arrange the events that happen in your story? Develop your characters, help the reader connect with them and understand their motivations, expand the conflict, raise the tension. You can do it. I can't wait to read your stories. I really can't. This is just a summary again of the project. All the information is up on the Township Sun. There are lots of tips and advice on the YouTube channel, on the Township Sun YouTube channel, from not just me, but the other facilitators. So we have fiction, non-fiction, poetry, arts and photography. We have working with an editor as well, a magazine editor. So lots of information and tips and advice on there. So do check it out. Submission details. So this I have heard today. So I've heard today that this deadline is no longer December the 1st, 2022. It is in February 2023. So you have a bit longer to do this. So bear that in mind. You will have time not just to write one short story, but you might write 3 or 4 short stories. There's no limit on how many you enter. So the next workshop, what are we going to look at? It is going to be on Thursday, 10th of November. What are we going to look at? We're going to look at ways to end your short story with a bang, to make it really memorable so readers will still be thinking about it days later. And we're going to have a little look at possible things to avoid. So yes, thank you very much for joining me, and I hope to see you soon. Bye.